Well, after having a flat 2023, the IPO market poised to rebound next year with some high-profile names leading the way. We've got OpenAI, Reddit, and Shein, just to name a few, all headlining a potential class of companies that could go public. But there are still some challenges, according to our next guest, like next year's economic picture still coming into focus. For more on what the IPO market will look like in 2024, we turn to Rainmaker Securities Managing Director, Greg Martin. Greg, good to see you as always. So we have these sort of marquee names that could be leading things. We had some marquee names, as we've discussed before, that were supposed to, salvage the market this year. Didn't quite work out that way. So what's going to be key to let us know whether the environment is going to be better in 2024?
Well, thank you for having me. Good to see you again. Right now we're in a green light situation. We have a very 10-year now below 400 basis points, down over 100 basis points in the last 3 months. We have a very positive Fed cycle, somewhere between 100 and 150 basis point reduction expected in 2024. We have a pretty stable economy. VIX is near a 5-year low. So the conditions are actually quite good. And we have, as you mentioned, a very strong pipeline of companies. And so if these conditions hold up, and of course there's all kinds of geopolitical risks, and growth is still fairly tepid, so there's reasons that things might not develop. I would expect we could have a major 2024 if these conditions hold up, and it'll be interesting to see if some of these companies that will test the market early, like the companies you mentioned, will start to show really strong aftermarket performance. I mean, one of the reasons we had a slowdown at the end of this year is because some of the companies that did go public had kind of relatively mediocre performance. And I'm thinking of like Klaviyo and Instacart and Birkenstock. And so I think what we're going to need is a few of these companies to go out and to perform well, and then that could be a real jet stream for 2024.
And Greg, do you think, next year, are there certain kinds of companies that you would expect to, in 2024, get a more positive reception from public market investors? Do you think you got to show in 2024, you have to show a proven business model, a decent bottom line, Greg?
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of these companies that, frankly, have been waiting for a few years now to go public, who maybe, previously were more focused on growth, I do think profitability is more in vogue, and I think it's much more important to show, better business unit economics, more stable but profitable growth. And so I think our first batch of companies will be, and the companies that will succeed, and the companies that underwriters are going to want to take public, are going to be ones that have that more predictable, profitable model. And so I don't think we're going to see the high flyers necessarily, although if we do see a nice flow of IPOs, we may get back to the high flyers, which could be some of those AI companies who won't be profitable, but will be growing extremely well. So that'll be interesting as we look to the later parts of the year as to whether some of these high growers can actually access the public markets as well.
Well, and Greg, sort of on a related front is going to be the investor appetite for IPOs of any kind, right? I think back to the class of 2021, which initially there was a lot of enthusiasm, there was a lot of activity, because people were sort of coming off the pandemic, still had a lot of cash, wanted to put it to work in the market. And it obviously doesn't feel like we're there right now, but kind of where are we on that continuum?
Well, there's still a lot of cash on the sidelines. There's still a lot of money sitting in money markets. And frankly, the return in the money markets is still pretty strong. It's close to 5%. You're talking generally pretty risk-free. And even in the 10-year and in short-term treasuries, it's still a pretty safe place to generate a healthy return. So I think that is a real bar for companies to go public. You have to obviously perform substantially better than the risk-free rate of return. So I do think that that's going to continue to be a bar. And that's why I said, I think we need to see some of these early companies perform well to get people off the sidelines, to get people out of the safer yielding instruments, because they're chasing more yield again. And if we, as I said, if we start to see that, if we start to see the kind of, historical performance, where it's 10, 15% and greater, type returns, I do think that that's going to be what really propels the IPO market this year.
And Greg, in terms of companies that could be ready to make a public market debut in 2024, what are some names, Greg, you're watching out for?
Well, there's certainly the people that have filed. You mentioned Shein. We see Turo out on file. We see companies like Reddit, who have been wanting to go public for a while. So those are the folks that have been kind of waiting to access the market for a while. I think it'll be interesting just from an early performance perspective. I think that those companies will probably be priced a little more conservatively. I get more excited about the really big, ultra size IPO, whether it's Stripe or Databricks, companies that could raise 5 to 10 billion potentially in an IPO. I think those guys are have the luxury to go public whenever they want. And they will be a real bellwether as to whether the IPO market is truly back and can really absorb that kind of volume. So, I would think about Stripe and Databricks as companies that I really want to focus on, because those are companies that can go public whenever they want, and they will take all of the oxygen out of the room when they do go public.
Well, and I was going to ask, on your platform, what are you seeing the most enthusiasm for, sort of the pre-IPO companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. We cover a lot of private companies, and clearly the AI companies are the hottest right now, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic, or now there's Elon Musk's new business XAI. So those are the companies that investors are really excited about. Now, caution that their valuations are very high. We've seen some announcements around Anthropic. Obviously, we follow the OpenAI business, and XAI is getting a lot of attention. We always have interest in companies like Stripe and SpaceX. SpaceX is another one that's interesting to watch as we think about whether they will spin out Starlink this year. They just recently got a valuation in the 150 billion range. So those are the companies that I think attract the most interest, but we're starting to see broader appetite because as people start to see the public markets opening up potentially, they want to come into the private markets to soak up some better valuations before the IPO pop occurs.
All right. Well, watch and see, an important trend to watch as we head into the new year here. Greg, thanks so much for being on the show today. We always love having you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.